Level 1. The machinery of Nazi brutality began long before the gas chambers. Prisoners from across occupied Europe were herded into sealed cattle cars by the SS and Gestapo and transported to concentration camps like Auschwitz, Dachau and Buchenwald. These journeys often lasted several days. Inside the cramped wagons, hundreds were crammed together without ventilation, food or water. Temperatures soared in summer and plummeted below freezing in winter. People suffocated, dehydrated and died standing where they were packed. By the time the train screeched to a halt beneath the iron gates of Auschwitz-Birkenau, dozens of bodies often lay lifeless on the floorboards. For those who survived transport, the reception process was deliberately designed to break their spirit. SS guards unleashed attack dogs, shouted insults, and used whips and rifle butts to force prisoners into chaotic lines. Families were torn apart instantly, men separated from women, parents from children. Prisoners were stripped naked, shaved bald, and issued striped uniforms. Names disappeared, numbers were tattooed onto forearms as part of an industrial process to erase identity. At Auschwitz, even the infamous slogan, Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, mocked new arrivals as they passed beneath it, unaware that for most, death awaited within hours. This calculated humiliation marked the first level of brutality, the destruction of individuality and humanity before physical extermination even began. Level 2. After arrival, prisoners entered a nightmare of systematic exploitation across Nazi concentration camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau, Dachau, Mauthausen and Buchenwald. The SS treated human life as a disposable resource, assigning men, women and even children to forced labour under impossible conditions. At Auschwitz, hundreds were marched daily to nearby factories like EAG Farben's Buna, synthetic rubber plant, construction sites and stone quarries. Those deemed unproductive were starved deliberately to death or sent directly to the gas chambers. Food rations were designed to ensure slow physical collapse. Prisoners received about 300 to 700 calories per day, a watery soup, a crust of black bread, and occasionally a slice of rotten potato. Malnutrition rapidly caused diseases like dysentery, typhus, and tuberculosis. In overcrowded barracks, wooden bunks stacked 3 high crammed 6 to 8 prisoners on each tier. With no proper sanitation, open buckets served as latrines for hundreds, filling the air with unbearable stench. Daily routines amplified suffering. Prisoners rose at 4:30 a.m. To whistles and barking dogs. They endured roll calls, called appel, that could last hours in freezing snow or blistering heat. Anyone who stumbled or fainted was beaten, shot or dragged to punishment blocks. SS guards frequently used Gestapo informants and capos, prisoner supervisors, to enforce terror among inmates. For many, death came not through executions, but through exhaustion, hunger, and untreated illness. At this stage, the Nazi camps transformed human beings into expendable tools, breaking their bodies long before their planned extermination. You've now seen just the beginning, how the Nazi camps stripped prisoners of dignity, starved them and broke their bodies through forced labour. But this is only the surface. In the next sections, we'll uncover the classified horrors, medical experiments, Josef Mengelé's twin studies, and the industrial-scale extermination machinery that turned Auschwitz and Birkenau into symbols of pure terror. If you're finding this deep dive valuable, subscribe to Krisis Logs before it's classified. Like this video, share it with others who seek the hidden layers of war history. Dora Asitfraum and stay with us. The darkest revelations are still ahead. Level 3. Inside Auschwitz and Birkenau, Nazi ideology fused with pseudoscience to create a laboratory of human suffering. Under the direction of SS doctors, the camps became centres for inhumane medical experiments disguised as research. Prisoners, mostly Jews, Roma and Soviet POWs, were selected from incoming transports and taken to Block 10, infamous for experimentation. Here, victims were subjected to sterilization trials, genetic studies, and biological torture without anesthesia. Dr. Karl Klauberg injected caustic chemicals directly into women's reproductive organs in an attempt to develop mass sterilization techniques for undesirable populations. Most endured agonizing infections, permanent damage, or death. At the same time, Dr. Horst Schumann exposed prisoners to high-dose X-ray radiation, burning flesh and destroying internal organs. But no figure embodies the horrors of Auschwitz more than Dr. Josef Mengele, the so-called Angel of Death. Obsessed with genetics, Mengele focused particularly on twins, selecting them personally from the arrival ramps. Children were injected with unknown substances, had their blood swapped, and were deliberately infected with diseases. Many were dissected after death to compare organ structures. Survivors recall Mengele's cheerful demeanour, whistling classical music as he decided who lived and who died. Beyond twins, experiments targeted dwarfs, pregnant women, and people with disabilities. Prisoners were deliberately wounded to study infection, injected with typhus, and subjected to bone transplants and organ removal without anesthesia. None of these experiments had valid scientific purpose. They were acts of torture cloaked in research. At this stage, Nazi camps became more than prisons. They were factories of pain, exploiting human bodies in the name of ideology. Level 4. By 1942, the Nazi regime transformed camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau into factories of mass extermination. What began as forced labour evolved into a mechanised killing process designed for maximum efficiency. At Birkenau, 4 massive gas chamber and crematoria complexes were constructed. Crematoria 2 and 3 each processed up to 1,440 corpses daily, while crematoria 4 and 5 handled about 768 bodies each per day. Combined, their designed capacity exceeded 4,400 bodies daily, though at peak operations, Sonderkommando testimonies describe over 8,000 victims burned in a single day. The method was calculated and deceptively efficient. Deportation trains arrived directly at the Birkenau ramp, carrying between 1,000 and 3,000 prisoners per transport. Under SS supervision, Dr. Josef Mengele and other officers conducted selections within minutes. Those deemed fit for labour were separated, while the elderly, children, pregnant women, and the ill were sent straight to the gas chambers. The chambers themselves were disguised as communal shower rooms, fitted with fake shower heads to maintain calm. Once sealed, Zyklon B crystals were dropped through ceiling vents, releasing lethal cyanide gas. Within 10 to 20 minutes, silence replaced screams. Next came the Sonderkommando units, Jewish prisoners forced to remove bodies, extract gold teeth, shave hair, and drag corpses to furnaces or open pits. Survivor testimonies describe continuous smoke columns, the stench of burning flesh, and the eerie silence afterward. This stage marked the Nazi camp's shift into industrial-scale genocide, where murder became an engineered routine, precise, calculated, and relentlessly efficient. Level 5. By 1944, the Sonderkommando units, Jewish prisoners forced to operate the gas chambers and crematoria at Auschwitz-Birkenau, understood their fate. The SS routinely executed these work units every few months to erase witnesses to the Nazi killing machinery. Facing certain death, they planned the largest prisoner uprising ever attempted within a Nazi death camp. For months, members of the Sonderkommando secretly smuggled gunpowder and explosives from a nearby Weisswasser munitions factory, aided by 4 Polish female prisoners, Alla Goertner, Esther Weisblum, Regina Safia Stein, and Rosa Robota. These women risked constant torture and execution to deliver small amounts of powder hidden in scraps of cloth and clothing seams. On October 7, 1944, the revolt began. At Crematorium 4, Sonderkommando prisoners attacked SS guards with hammers, axes, and improvised explosives. The building was destroyed in the blast. Simultaneously, uprisings broke out at Crematorium 2, where prisoners overwhelmed guards and attempted to breach the electrified fences. The resistance was short-lived. Within hours, SS reinforcements crushed the revolt. Around 450 Sonderkommando members were executed on the spot or tortured to death afterward. The 4 women who supplied explosives were publicly hanged, their final cries recorded by survivors. Be strong, be brave. Despite its failure, the Sonderkommando revolt stands as a testament of defiance within the heart of industrialized genocide, where even in the shadow of certain death, prisoners fought to reclaim dignity. Level 6. Beyond mass murder, the Nazi camps perfected the exploitation of their victims, even in death. At Auschwitz-Birkenau, a massive storage complex nicknamed Canada by prisoners symbolized wealth and abundance. But its contents revealed the depth of Nazi dehumanization. When trains arrived, prisoners were forced to leave behind everything they owned: suitcases, jewelry, clothing, family photos, toys, and heirlooms. These belongings were collected and sorted inside the Canada warehouses, where hundreds of prisoners worked under SS supervision. Survivors recall mountains of shoes, piles of gold teeth, and tons of human hair shaved from corpses. Entire rooms were filled with wedding rings, children's shoes, and eyeglasses. A surreal landscape of interrupted lives. The economic exploitation was systematic. Gold fillings and jewelry were melted down and shipped to the Reichsbank. Clothing was redistributed to German civilians or sold through state-controlled channels. Even human hair was processed into textiles, ropes, and felt for German industry. Every trace of individuality was reduced to raw material for the Nazi war machine. For the prisoners assigned to Canada, this work inflicted unique psychological torment. Sorting through the possessions of the murdered meant constantly confronting the scale of loss. A child's teddy bear, a photograph of a wedding day, a mother's letter never read. Survivor testimonies describe this duty as a second death, killing identity, memory, and dignity long after the person was gone. At this stage, the brutality was no longer just physical. It extended into erasing the very evidence of existence. Level 7. In January 1945, as the Soviet Red Army advanced toward Auschwitz-Birkenau, Heinrich Himmler ordered the evacuation of the camp to conceal the scale of Nazi atrocities. What followed became known as the Death Marches, one of the most lethal final acts of the Holocaust. On January 17, 1945, approximately 58,000 prisoners, skeletal from starvation and disease, were forced from Auschwitz and its subcamps. They were given no food, little water, and thin striped uniforms despite sub-zero Polish winter temperatures. Guards drove them westward toward camps deeper inside Germany, such as Buchenwald and Mauthausen. The marches lasted days to weeks, covering distances of up to 60 kilometers per day. Those who stumbled, fell behind, or collapsed from exhaustion were shot on the spot. Survivor testimonies describe roads littered with frozen corpses, their faces buried in the snow, as columns of prisoners trudged past in silence. At night, prisoners were forced to sleep outdoors on icy ground, exposed to temperatures below -20 degrees Celsius. Many died from hypothermia, starvation, and disease before dawn. Others were killed deliberately by SS guards who sought to eliminate witnesses before liberation. By the time the Soviet forces entered Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, more than 15,000 prisoners had died during these forced evacuations. Those too weak to march were left behind, most in critical condition, suffering from typhus, dysentery, and extreme malnutrition. The death marches symbolised the final cruelty of the Nazi system. Murder continued even as defeat became inevitable. Level 8. By late 1944, with the Soviet Red Army closing in and the Third Reich collapsing, Heinrich Himmler issued secret orders to destroy all traces of the atrocities committed inside Auschwitz-Birkenau and other Nazi death camps. This wasn't just a cover-up, it was the final stage of brutality, erasing both the dead and the proof they ever existed. Beginning in November 1944, SS units dynamited crematoria 2 and 3, dismantled crematoria 4 and 5, and burned administrative records. Prisoners from the Sonderkommando were forced into the ultimate desecration, digging up mass graves, retrieving thousands of decomposing bodies, and burning them in open pits to eliminate physical evidence. Survivor testimonies describe clouds of ash drifting across Birkenau, settling on barracks and pathways like snowfall. Even the ashes were not spared. SS guards ordered prisoners to scatter human remains into the Vistula River and nearby lakes, attempting to wash away every trace of mass extermination. But the cover-up extended beyond corpses. Entire warehouses filled with stolen belongings, children's toys, wedding rings, suitcases and clothing were looted, burned or shipped deep into Germany. The Nazis also executed thousands of remaining prisoners, especially those who had witnessed the operation of the gas chambers. The intention was absolute, to annihilate memory itself. Despite these efforts, the scale of the genocide was too vast to erase. When the Soviet 60th Army liberated Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, they uncovered 7 tons of human hair, endless piles of shoes, and mountains of personal effects, haunting evidence of a crime the Nazis tried to hide. This final stage marked the ultimate brutality, the attempted erasure of an entire people, their names, their lives, and even their deaths.